I was too lazy to draw a hand here, so I drew an Illuminati. I drew Bill Cipher. Hello everybody and welcome to cloudtoonz. And today's video is actually going to be a little different. Because if you didn't know, I actually did apply to CalArts right outside of high school. So this video is gonna be about CalArts. And you may know the name CalArts because of the CalArts style, you know, the whole bean mouth thing. But it's incredibly an inaccurate term, and it's coined by John Kay, who we don't talk about on this channel. And if you look at the photo, it has Gumball and Steven, and the creators of Gumball and Steven Universe did not go to CalArts. So only the creators of Gravity Falls and Star vs. Forces of Evil went there. I would recommend checking out Izzy Iz's video on the CalArts style. It is very good, and if you want to learn about it in more detail, check out their video. I'm a huge fan of Izzy Iz, and I think they're a fantastic YouTuber. But what I want to get into is the school itself, because I'm sure some people don't know CalArts is actually a school or a university. And it's really well known for its animation program. And I would say one of my favorite facts about CalArts is that Walt Disney and his brother Roy Disney were the founders of the school. And it became a home to a new generation of animators. So a lot of really famous animators went there, such as Tim Burton, John Lasseter, even though we don't like him, Pete Docter, who is currently the head of Pixar, so many, influential animators. And if you don't know, also, in a lot of Disney movies, if you know the A113 cameo, it is a reference to one of the CalArts classrooms. And I want to say a disappointing fact about that classroom, even though it used to be a classroom for all the famous animators, they switched it to a music room. I feel like it would be most animators' dreams to attend CalArts, and it was certainly my dream. A lot of my personal favorite animators went there. I was always a huge fan of Craig McCracken, who created the Powerpuff Girls, Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends, Wander Over Yonder, and his lesser-known show, Kid Cosmic. I would say still check it out. It's a great show. And I would also say one of my favorite things about CalArts is that you get industry connections with studios. So a lot of people who went to CalArts end up working at big animation studios and become showrunners themselves. And honestly, it is my dream to be a showrunner. I actually do have an idea of my very own animated show. I don't know if I can execute it, but I guess so. But I am actually going to talk about my experience applying to CalArts, and I'm going to say this, my experience does not reflect other people's experiences. I had an experience that was more on the negative side, but other people might have had a positive experience of applying there. And also, I'm not here to bash the school. I'm not here to compare it to other schools. I may say whether or not I recommend applying there, and I'm not here to discourage people from applying based off of my experience, because my experience is not everybody else's experience. So if you want to apply, go ahead. I am not here to stop you. Do what you want. However, I will say something. I was planning to go to my first year of college in fall of 2022. And I applied to CalArts back in 2021, 2022. And when you apply there, there's the early deadline, which just means you get $20 off your application. And then there's the later deadline, which is the regular price to apply there, which is $70. So I did the $70 because I was not finished with my portfolio during the earlier deadline. I also ended up joining a server for CalArts, a Discord server, to talk to people who go there or people who are applying there, and it was a lot of people applying there. And I remember posting my work there on the critique channel, and yeah, I definitely got a lot of criticism. So my art was not up to par at the time. If you look at my art now, it is very different than my art back in 2021. I didn't even have Procreate at the time. I had a completely different tablet that did not support Procreate. And then I ended up getting my iPad in 2022 after I applied to CalArts. Maybe that was a bad decision. Maybe I should have gotten it earlier. But when you apply specifically to the character animation program, a big thing people talk about is the sketchbooks. And here's something I wish I knew before applying. The sketchbooks aren't the most important part of your portfolio. It's just a small piece of your portfolio compared to 20 other pieces. But people put so much emphasis, like applicants put so much emphasis on the sketchbooks. So I definitely put a lot of emphasis. Here's mine. I eventually put this on the sketchbook after I got my rejection letter. CalArts rejected me. Wah, wah. I don't think sketchbooks should be the priority when applying to the character animation program. Another thing I wish I considered was the experimental animation program. So I have a weird story. I actually applied to the film program, like just the regular live action film program, because I wasn't prepared to apply to the character animation. It was still a bad idea. Because if you don't know this about CalArts, you can't change majors. You can't double major or change majors, which honestly I'm not a fan of. Okay, like I understand they want you to know what you're gonna do and stuff like that, but I feel like people are gonna drop out if they end up studying something they don't like. Or if they're unhappy with their major. I think they should have allowed for people to change their majors or double major or something like that, because at the time, I wasn't sure what I wanted, really. I really wish I went for the experimental animation major, because the character animation program is quite rigid with what they do. It's like you do character design, storyboards, and at the time I had zero experience in that. I was learning how to figure draw. And while yes, I have made animations before, and I've even like made my own OCs, I just wasn't great at drawing at the time. Like, obviously, if you look at my art now, it's much better, but I just did not know how to draw. I know I went through a phase where I tried to draw realistic, and then I tried cartoony. I just couldn't really find a good balance of what my art was at the time. I would recommend applying to CalArts if you are confident in your art. And I was not confident at the time. I was a hobbyist artist who would poster art on DeviantArt, and I thought, hey, if I put my hobby art on DeviantArt, it could get me into CalArts. Babe, it does not. I applied to a school closer to me, like it was an hour away from my house, I think, maybe around an hour to 2 hours. And it did have a higher acceptance rate than CalArts, but I was rejected from there. So, go figure. And then every other school I applied to were public colleges, and I got accepted into all of them. Half of them were in-state, half of them were out-of-state. I got accepted in both the in-state and out-of-state colleges, including the art programs at the few in-state colleges I applied to. But, yeah, that was kind of a disappointment. So, the majority of my portfolio was working on that dang sketchbook. And I will have a full version of this video that will be up on my Patreon, where I react to my sketchbook and my cringy portfolio and the video I submitted. So, if you want to apply to CalArts, I would say have confidence in your portfolio. And I think another thing that should be talked about is mental health. So I was actually mentally struggling at the time I applied to CalArts. And even the other school, I don't want to get into details about my mental health problems at the time, but I was clearly struggling, and it made it very difficult to motivate myself to do the work for the portfolio. So the advice I was given was to be myself in my portfolio, and a lot of times it is easier said than done. I think being myself is quite difficult because I'm doing what I can to impress them. And I feel like I could say, hey, I can put some of my neurodivergent identity and call it a day. So I did. I called it a day. And it looked like a mental breakdown. Because what I would hear about CalArts portfolios, some people were talking about how some of them were in black and white, some of them were messy, and that's totally valid. Now I realize kind of like how that's valid, but at the time I was like, clean slate, perfection, and I am still a huge perfectionist. I am currently applying and trying to apply for animation jobs or art-related jobs as like backup, stuff like that. I don't live in a place where there are animation jobs, which I also hate to say, so I probably have to move far away if I want to go somewhere where there are animation jobs. But I am still like in this mindset where it's like perfection, 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 and I'm learning how to get out of my mindset. I am going to talk to a portfolio tutor soon, which I actually did when I was applying to CalArts. So there is this thing called National Portfolio Day where you can show people your portfolio and they can review it and tell you which stuff you can put in your portfolio, stuff like that. So I did that, and the person that was reviewing my portfolio was not being honest. Like, I would show them my work and he would be like, oh yeah, that's good. That's good. And I took that to heart because this person actually worked at a big art school or a popular art school. I'm not going to say what school that is. So I believed, yeah, my portfolio could get me into an art school. And it didn't. But if you're dealing with mental health problems or extreme stress, I'm going to be honest. I don't recommend you apply to CalArts. It is very mentally draining, and when you get the rejection letter, it's likely going to hurt your mental health even more. Like, a lot of thoughts that I had when I got rejected, it was like, all this for a stupid rejection letter. So I was very hesitant about applying to CalArts because I kind of knew that I wouldn't get in. Like, I had that feeling that I would get rejected. However, the reason why I applied, because I asked people if I should apply, and everybody's like, yeah, give it a chance, give it a chance. And I can totally understand their perspective, because a lot of times, yeah, you don't know if you're gonna get it or not. Like, sometimes, yeah, you get lucky, and sometimes you don't. So I pulled out of applying to the character animation program last minute, just because I did not know I had to do a portfolio other than the sketchbook. And I was obviously not prepared for that. And I decided to apply for the film program instead. So if you want to apply for the film program, you have to submit a video, and you can submit like other stuff you've made. So I submitted a video, and I made the video about being neurodivergent. And it was like about a neurodivergent college student who went into their first college experience with a couple of roommates. I filmed it in this room, even though this room looked completely different at the time, and I just remember using green screen one time to pretend I was at a Starbucks. It just looked like a old YouTube skit rather than a video, and I will be reacting to that video on my Patreon. Like, I have refused to watch it since getting my rejection letter because I just didn't want to be associated with that video. But you also had to write 2 essays. One was like your film inspiration, like, films that inspire you. And I put a few films that inspired me. I think I put The Incredibles in, and I mainly said it was my inspiration film because I could relate to Violet when I was a teenager. I don't think that's what you should put in your essay if you're applying to a film program, I'm letting ya know. I think you should, like, talk about, like, the static and dynamic shots, stuff like that, but no, I'm all about the story. Like, I'm huge on storytelling, and maybe now I'm more knowledgeable about cinematography, but I just believed inspiration films were like, the story inspires you. And then the other thing was why I wanted to do film, and I decided to make that my whole life story and a whole vent thing. I was like, I started YouTube when I was 8, which is true. Not this channel. It was a different channel. I also talked about how I got bullied at one point. Which, okay. I don't think they're gonna take someone just because they were making videos when they were really little. It's like, I don't think a math program would take someone because they could solve addition and subtraction when they were really little. So yeah, my portfolio was a dumpster fire, and not to mention, I actually did submit it late, and I made the excuse I couldn't submit it on the site, but I got an extended deadline, and I eventually submitted it. And I waited a few months, and yeah, those few months were grueling, but I did get my iPad at the time. And here comes March of 2022. I get an email from CalArts saying there was an update on your application, and I kind of knew it was the rejection letter, and I actually had my mom look at it for me before I received it. So I kind of knew I got my CalArts letter, and I have some spoilers for you. So, spoiler, I was accepted into CalArts. Woohoo! Nah, I was rejected. Ha! I already mentioned it in that video. Yeah, I'd be lying if I said I was accepted. And obviously, I was very upset about that. I wanted to go to CalArts so bad. It was like my absolute dream to go there, and those dreams were crushed. But a lot of things that I did when I was applying is that I highly compared my art to other people's art. I felt like everybody's art was better. Even like those who didn't get in, like I saw a lot of amazing art that didn't get in, and I would constantly like compare my art to other people's art. Just made me hate my art even more. Especially on the CalArts Discord server, like I would see people make like masterful figure drawings and stuff like that. And I was like, I couldn't really do that. But I did learn how to figure draw during the application process because there was an after-school club in my high school for figure drawing that I did. And I guess it, like, helped a little bit, but I didn't really get the gist of figure drawing at the time. So within character designs, I obviously tried. I tried to do a character design based off my dad. It looked okay, it just looked very generic. I feel like every character design I made was like super generic. It was just like taken from, I was probably using styles of different shows that I was watching at the time. And I tried to do one storyboard, and it was literally, I was doing it on actually Autodesk Sketchbook, which is also an amazing app for art. I think it's a good digital art app. I personally prefer Procreate, but I used to use Autodesk Sketchbook, and I still think it's a great app. And it turned out terrible. I tried to do like backgrounds and stuff, and I had no knowledge of how to do perspective or proportions and stuff like that. So I just didn't have the best knowledge in art. I actually didn't really take an art class in high school until my junior year. I was actually more of a theater kid at the time, but now looking back at it, I should have like taken art in high school. Maybe I would have had better knowledge at the time. But I remember at the time I kept using the excuse like, oh, I don't have the resources. I don't have Procreate. I don't have an iPad. Stuff like that. It was a pretty poor excuse. Like, I think most art schools want you to make what you have in materials. But I'm gonna say, despite me criticizing myself when applying to CalArts, there are a few things that I will criticize CalArts for. So, CalArts has a summer program for high schoolers to get into animation. It's like a summer residency program, part of their extended studies, and it teaches high schoolers storyboards, stuff like that, but they have to travel to California. It's quite expensive. I was never able to do it. I was also in high school during COVID, meaning it probably never could have happened for me. So the program is called CSSA, so it's California State Summer School for the Arts, and it's cheaper for those who live in California. And I've mentioned I don't live in California, because California is a plane or two away from me. So, and yes, I have been to California, but it's always a plane or two away from me. And every time I've been through a layover or something like that. But it's typically held at CalArts. This year they are actually using Cal Poly Pomona as their host site, and it's government-led. And if you attended this, you have a better chance of getting into CalArts than somebody who didn't. People who live in California have an advantage for getting into CalArts. So I feel like that's where some people are at a disadvantage. I will also say, not everybody has the resources to learn film or animation. My high school did not offer animation classes. There was a summer program, like, within my high school that had animation classes, but it was, like, only 4 weeks. I did take a cartooning class back then, though. I didn't take animation, but I took cartooning. And I did learn some stuff from there. I did learn a little bit about proportions and stuff, but not in enough depth for me to be good at it. So some people, yes, are at disadvantage. Also, my high school didn't have a film class. I did take photography in high school, and I did submit some of my photography to my portfolio, but there was no film class, so I didn't know how to use a real film camera. I was actually filming my video on my phone, which my phone at the time did not have cinematic mode, which honestly I hate cinematic mode, but I couldn't really blur backgrounds. It was just a shitty iPhone camera. So I really don't like how CalArts just has this expectation for you to be knowledgeable about what you're studying when you apply or to get into the school. I just think that's very unfair because not everybody has the advantage to learn animation. And yeah, you can learn it online and self-teach yourself. And I am gonna say I am mostly self-taught myself, but a lot of times you don't get critiques, or you don't learn how to take criticism, or you don't have, like, connections to other people who want to do the same thing as you, stuff like that. So I think it's definitely quite difficult for some people. So when I got rejected from CalArts, did I ever think about applying again? And the answer is yes. I definitely thought about applying for a second time, but I just never did because of my mental health at the time. So I ended up going to an in-state school that didn't even have a film or animation program, so I double majored in studio art and communications and digital studies, which both were great majors. I definitely got, like, more knowledge in communications, especially, and studying media, which I am actually pretty big on, and I do make a lot of videos about here. I do like to talk about media, so I don't just want to do animation or run a show. I personally enjoy talking about media and analyzing media, so that was, like, a good major for me. And I'm glad my college allowed me to do it, but at the college I went to, I am not going to say what college I went to, but I'm not going to sugarcoat things. Like, I can say, yeah, I did have some good for not getting into CalArts, but at the same time, I can't say it was like all rainbows and sunshines. I did have a lot of mental health problems going into college. I was having constant mental health crises. My grades weren't very good my first semester, and it was just very difficult for me. I did make a few friends, but that's it. And then I'm not going to get into detail about all my mental health problems, but I went through something really terrible my second semester, and I was just like at rock bottom at the time. And then I went on a different medication. Like, I started taking my medication really seriously, and I started to get better. And I started to recover and stuff like that. And once I was recovering, I started to see, like, the good that came out of it. And obviously, it would have been too late to apply to CalArts when I was recovering. And I just wanted to focus on my own stuff. Maybe the classes I was in, I did consider transferring out of my university at one point. It just never happened. I looked into other schools. I even looked at some master's programs. But the thing is, a lot of people who apply to CalArts don't get in their first time. They have to apply twice, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times to get in. And it is quite a grueling process. Like, an example of a famous animator that has been rejected from CalArts, actually twice, is J.G. Quintel, who created Regular Show. So J.G. Quintel said in an interview with Animation Magazine, "Then I applied to CalArts and was rejected a couple of times. I needed to learn more about the fundamentals of animation, drawing, and perspective. I took classes all over the place. So I became super ready, and then I finally got into the program at CalArts. I feel really lucky for making this show right now." He's obviously referring to Regular Show. Like, dude is so talented, but he has experienced rejection, and I think that has helped a lot. And I really wish I saw this when I got my rejection letter from CalArts, but if you don't know, the composer Michael Giacchino also applied to CalArts and got rejected, but then he attended SVA. And I'm gonna admit, Michael Giacchino is like one of the best composers ever. Like, he did the iconic soundtrack from so many Pixar films, like The Incredibles, Up, Inside Out. Like, those are incredibly iconic in their own right. He actually posted on Twitter his rejection letter back from the 80s, and he said, "The end of the road isn't always where you think it is," which I think is a great message. And I hope I am inspiring people by talking about my experience getting rejected from CalArts. But I will talk about a couple of the downsides of the school. So last year in 2025, CalArts introduced a class for generative AI. Can we get a boo? We don't like generative AI. So their statement relates to the rise of artificial intelligence is changing how we make art. And CalArts, a school known for pushing creative boundaries, is addressing this head on. Pushing creative boundaries is not making AI slop. Pushing creative boundaries is experimenting with different mediums and stuff like that. That's what I actually did at my university. Even though I wasn't an animation major, I still experimented with animation for certain projects, even for non-animation related classes. So yeah, generative AI is not pushing creative boundaries. So here's what they also have to say: artificial intelligence and creative practices. As a community of artists, CalArts acknowledges that artificial intelligence represents another multifaceted development in our creative toolkit. Much like the many technological shifts our community has embraced throughout history, we recognize AI systems can generate forms of content including images, language, code, voice, and video through processing of existing data, often raising complex questions about attribution, privacy, and ethical use. Schools and programs will develop specific guidelines that align with their artistic and pedagogical goals. As we navigate the evolving landscape of AI tools, our implementation approach emphasizes honest conversations and trust building rather than rigid rules. While AI has no inherent awareness of truth or creativity, it can serve as a productive tool when used thoughtfully. We commit to regular community dialogue to access and update these guidelines as AI capabilities and creative applications continue to evolve. To support this commitment, we continue to develop practical guides that address emerging uses of AI across our community while maintaining our focus on breaking down barriers and fostering artistic innovation. Oh my god, that was a handful. So they still are pro-human centered creativity. They just allow for people to use AI tools such as Google Gemini, which is an AI generator, and also for experimental learning, which some people definitely have that argument, like AI can be a tool to enhance creativity and stuff like that. I know some people think, oh, AI is just going to be used to do in-betweens and animations, but I wouldn't go there. It's kind of a bad idea. It just makes the product look unfinished. On April 24th, 2025, CalArts announced that they were opening a center for artists and technology called the Chanel Center for Artists and Technology. However, this sector of the school was funded by the Chanel Culture Fund, and the goal of this Culture Fund is to support cultural innovators and advancing new ideas. However, the priority for the Chanel Center for Art and Technology is using and exploring generative AI. And of course, many of the CalArts students were not happy with that. A lot of students have given CalArts backlash, including a well-known artist called Mepeti. I love her content and I love her art. She attended CalArts, and here's what she had to say. I just stumbled upon photos of the Chanel x CalArts event hosted at Jim Lovelace's house, and yikes. Not one single student, not one single teacher I recognize. Hardly anyone under the age of 60. All I see is a bunch of smooshy administrations and the dean of the School of Art. I only have access to photos from this event. Yet that's all I needed to tell me how woefully out of touch and thoughtless the upper management of the school are. It is as if they knew they were making a disastrous decision, so they hid it from the eyes and students of faculty until after the fact. So they just weren't very honest with their students, and they kind of lied about it. And I think that really sucks that they're getting into generative AI. Somebody else commented, you know what? Thank God I got rejected twice. I'm like, hey dude, maybe thank God I did get rejected somehow. Like, my university did have classes on AI as well, but I didn't go to an art school. And yeah, I agree it was unethical, and I never took a class specifically on generative AI. I definitely talked about the ethics about it, but because I was a communications major, but I never took a class on it. One of my classes did make me do AI-generated images for one assignment. And as much as I hated to do it, I just decided to mess around with, I think it was DALL-E, and generate just the worst stuff ever just because I hated to do it. But I don't know if the ethical views of the professor has changed. At least with the university I went to, I got to study abroad twice. So I looked. CalArts has a more limited study abroad program than the university I went to. A big reason why I chose my university was for the study abroad program, and I'm so glad I got to do it. As well as the fact that at the university I went to, I was able to get my art into art galleries and stuff like that, and it was a much less competitive environment. And I remember wanting the CalArts tunnel of graffiti and stuff like that at my university, and eventually they opened one, and I got to put some Alpha Sex Undyne propaganda on the walls, which was really cool. And I'm not gonna sugarcoat anything, it was not all sunshines and rainbows for me, but hey, the university that I went to caused me to be more creative anyway. Again, I also revived the Western Animation Club at the university I went to, and I got to be president for a couple of years. It was really cool. I can't tell what it would be like if I went to CalArts. I definitely think things would have turned out differently. I probably would have been in severe debt since the school's very expensive. But I don't know, maybe I'd have a job in California by now, but maybe I shouldn't think on it. Because hey, I think rejection can be an opportunity to be more creative, as I do plan on creating my own studio, maybe in my area, because there are no creative animation studios where I live. So I can make animation more accessible. And I think those who see a problem or have experienced a problem are able to create something. I just hope this video can give a better insight for those who are thinking about applying to CalArts, or for those who have dealt with rejection, or even for those who went there or go there. If you go there or went there, let me know your experiences. And thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in another video. Bye!